Good morning, Coalition of Concerned Republicans. I just want to start off by saying that it's great to have a great group like the Coalition of Concerned Republicans that have come together here in Lake County. And I just want to thank you guys for joining us here at Restoring Our American Republic, where my good friend and colleague Chuck Benoit and I just go over the political issues of the day. So again, I just want to give you a heartfelt thank you for watching. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, we'd love for you to subscribe. You can find this on YouTube and Facebook in particular. And then Chuck posts this on his X account. So it's a good way to watch and stay in touch with what's going on. We really tried today or on this broadcast to bring you things that you don't get everywhere else. Okay. Just some insight from up close and personal interactions with the various different political organizations and individuals around the state that most people really don't know. That's something we really try to do for you, to give you an insider's view of what's actually going on. So with that said, and I do have a couple of opening points, but I would like to get Chuck up on screen here so that we can introduce today's material. Chuck, how you doing this morning?
I'm fine, thank you, Mike Levine. How are you?
I'm doing great. So yeah, we have a Chuck who was just informing me off camera that he's got a really busy day today, which culminates in an interview. We're going to interview Mr. Tom Vail, who's running for the Florida House of Representatives in District 25 against the incumbent, notorious Taylor Yarkovsky. And the sooner that guy gets out of office, the happier I personally will be. This guy is a nightmare and doesn't even know it. Even though we've explained it to him to his face, both privately and publicly on many occasions, he still just doesn't understand why people don't like him. All right, as he uses our money at the Republican Executive Committee to self-aggrandize and suck up to Ashley Moody for his own personal gain. People, it's amazing to me, right, that these people are so insulated, so, the word is not self-aware, right? There's no self-awareness that they just don't understand that while they abscond with your political influence for their own benefit, that you're supposed to just be okay with that. And I'm just blown away by it. So for me personally, the sooner we can get Taylor Yarkovsky out of office, the better. So I'm glad my colleague Tom Vail's running, and I really hope that he is able to get across the finish line. Chuck, what do you think?
Yeah, well, Tom almost won that race about 4 years ago, right? And he
2022. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he failed by just a handful of votes. It obviously wasn't too big to rig.
I was surprised he got that close, to be honest with you. And again, I think that the election riggers just didn't see him coming.
Yeah, or something like that. I know he...
Right, so Chuck, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in and say, ladies and gentlemen, Chuck and I, we talked to quite a, the candidates all come, it's a joke, really, at the Republican Executive Committee meetings and at the various different grassroots organizational meetings that, candidates and elected officials don't really come to these meetings until it's election time. And I get that, to a degree. But we do get to talk to some of these folks, and particularly right now, like this CD11 race, Congressional District 11 race, which I'm just going to summarize as being between, the Lake County political powerhouse, Carey Baker, this guy, Joe Strada, who is on the Connect 100, which was Lake 100. But now they've changed their name because a lot of the hospital groups and stuff like that are getting involved, and they don't want it to be Lake 100. They'd like to affiliate this organization with a broader footprint. So now they call themselves Connect 100. And that gives Joe Strada a lot of really inside with the financially powerful and the politically powerful people. That really, I think, is where he actually came from, where his candidacy came out of Connect 100. Keeping in mind that Allison Strange, who is a sitting city council person in Claremont, is married to Brett Jones, and Brett Jones is the chair of Connect 100. and a very close friend of Taylor Yarkovsky, by the way. And so I believe that Joe Strada's campaign emerged out of Connect 100 because he brings a lot of money. He obviously must have showed an interest in running. He had the money, clean candidate, easy to get behind. The only negative for them, which is probably could be a positive for us, it's a positive really, that he has no political experience. And for Connect 100, I'm sure they're willing to provide him with all the guidance that he needs in order to do the things that they want done. So that's kind of where Joe Strada is. And then you get Tim Wilkins. And I was talking with Carey Baker on the phone a day or two ago, who's actually doing some polling. And Carey Baker tells me that Tim Wilkins just really has very low name recognition in Congressional District 11, which is the challenge that he has to overcome, Chuck. So that's kind of a deal. And come on, Chuck, if you don't mind. Sure. Get back engaged here a little bit. So what are your thoughts about that, Chuck?
Well, just interesting. My wife and I went out to dinner last night, and we were over in the Apopka Vineland Road area, and there was a fairly decent contingent of people waving signs and flags for Tim Wilkins over there. So
okay.
Just
good,
interesting. He's got a ground game.
Supporter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Tim Wilkins' strategy, to do the grassroots thing and get people out. I think, Tim's a really smart guy. He knows what he's facing. He knows what he needs to do in order to win this election. So that's good. That's really refreshing. I didn't know that. So that's really important. I'm sure that Brian Kennedy is going to do the same thing for him, plus maybe some canvassing up in the Sumter County area. I don't know what Rick Cartlands is going to do with the Republican Assembly here in Lake because Rick was not recognized as endorsing Tim Wilkins with the Sumter County Republican Assembly, which that was the plan. That was Brian Kennedy's plan, was he would get Lake and Sumter to be on board together endorsing Tim Wilkins. Now, I don't know whether the Lake Republican Assembly has endorsed Tim Wilkins or not, but Lake County was not included in the endorsement graphic that Tim Wilkins is demonstrating to the public. So I really don't know where Rick Cartland's Republican Assembly group is on that, but I have to assume that they're pretty closely aligned with Brian Kennedy's group in Sumter, Chuck. Any thoughts?
Well, we might. They might do something. I think, is it this Thursday? They have their meeting. No, that was last Thursday.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, Chuck, that these interviews have happened since the last meeting. So,
right.
Rick Cartland, but Rick did take a vote of his board of directors. So he has. I believe that the votes have been taken at the Republican Assembly in Lake County, and I believe I don't see why the Republican Assembly in Lake County wouldn't endorse Tim Wilkins, because to keep in step with what's going on in Sumter County, because that's much better for Tim Wilkins if he can pull both of those county Republican Assembly organizations together as one. Then that'll help him, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway. But one thing I want to just say, Chuck, real quick, is that, as you talk to all these candidates, and for me personally, I believe it's the obligation of every elected official to, number one, Chuck, you and I are going to agree, I think it's really important that we lead with this, that the job of government is to protect the rights of American citizens. Can you agree with that, Chuck?
Yes, Mike, that's what a republic is. It's, especially the American republic, it's for the people. Not the special interests, not the legislators. It's for we the people. And if they can't legislate for we the people, then they are not governing from a Republican perspective.
Okay, great. So I take this to the next level. And as I talk to these candidates, I bring it to their attention every single time. My personal life mission is to make life affordable for median household income families. And, when Tim Wilkins was on the broadcast, we talked a little bit about that. We talked about in interest rates in particular, which is a big driver of inflation. You know, depending on which way interest rates go, that depends on the direction that inflation goes. And I will tell you something, Chuck. When I go to the grocery store, I'm seeing people. My mom, when I was a little kid, had a little clicker, a little counter that every time she put something in our grocery basket, she put in the price of it. So she knew how much money she would have to pay when she got to the cash register. And I'm seeing a lot more of that now, where people are calculating their grocery bill while they're shopping, which is unusual for you know, because again, keep in mind, as I just explained, that was a big deal in my family. You know, when we went to the grocery store, my mom needed to know how much money she was going to be charged at the cash register because we were money tight. And now I'm seeing that in the grocery store a lot. And I would encourage all of our viewers to keep your eyes open for that. That is a major sign of economic status, right? How tight is the economy? When people start, you know, counting their grocery bill as they walk down the aisles, I would suggest that is a real strong indicator of a weak economy. Chuck, what do you think?
Well, I guess from my perspective, I don't do a lot of grocery shopping, but I agree that if people are having to do that, it's just not a good sign. The question is, how quickly are the gas prices coming down? How quickly can will that affect groceries as well as everything else? We are in a very, very difficult situation. I have confidence that President Trump's going to get us out of this. But as far as the the CD11 race and what our legislators could possibly do about that, I think the main thing would be to deal with the nation's debt. To pretty much. I think something that would affect inflation, even possibly more than interest rates.
Well, that's really no. Okay, thank you very much. I love what you just said because it gives me an opportunity to say that the reason President Trump wants low interest rates is because of debt service, right?
That's true.
As we talked about with Tim Wilkins, right? People need high interest rates. If interest rates for mortgages, let's just say, are 7 or 8%, the cost of housing is going to go down because people buy housing based on the down payment and the monthly payment, and the interest rate determines the monthly payment. So if you had 7.5% interest rates for mortgages, then housing values would go down. That's just the way it is. Housing would become affordable. So why does President Trump want low interest rates? Well, President Trump is serving almost $40 trillion in debt. So if interest rates go up, then he's going to spend more of the national budget on interest than he wants to, which understandable, totally understandable. But it is inflationary on consumers, and it drives the price of everything, including housing, which is a fundamental key component of every family's budget if you have to have a mortgage to own your home, which most people do. So that's my point of view. But what really goes back on the subject of interest rates, Chuck, which is, I'm so glad you took the position you took, because nobody lets other people use their money for free, except of course in America, where you drop your money into a bank and they charge you for the privilege of holding your money, which is, to me, is just ludicrous. I don't know how in the world we put our money in banks and banks charge us for the privilege of them overseeing our money when they're loaning our money out 9 times what they have on deposit, right? So, I mean, this whole system does not work for consumers, Chuck. And then, of course, you get into this Congressional District 11 race where 1 out of 4 voters is 65 years old or over. So I think that every senior should be able to earn 5% interest in a certificate of deposit, Chuck. I mean, to me, that should be a no-brainer. And as I was discussing this with Carey Baker on the phone a couple of days ago, he told me that his parents in retirement had all of their retirement savings in certificates of deposit. And he had to agree with me that low interest rates makes it where seniors are forced to invest their money in the stock market, which is risky. So Carey Baker seemed to agree with me that higher interest rates are good for seniors. But that never comes into the conversation, Chuck. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, again, the interest rate to inflation thing is, I think, what I was discussing, and it just depends on what economist you want to believe. I'm not an economist, but I'll read here and there, and I was just discussing the concept of inflation in and of itself, and that's tied more to the debt. Now, I get the fact that Donald Trump wants low rates for his because he's servicing his debt. I guess I'm just trying to get to our CD11 guys. What are they going to do about this? And
yeah, that's my point, Chuck.
Yeah.
That's where we're going with all this. Thank you because again, you and I, this conversation is heading in the same direction.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
what are CD11? I'm telling you right now that Tim Wilkins told us on our show that he thinks interest rates should be low. And the reason he thought interest rates should be low because he wants capital to be available for corporate America. Well, I don't give a damn about corporate America. Personally, I would be much more proud myself as a legislator to say that seniors can get a 5% interest rate on certificates of deposit. I'm much more interested in that than providing investment capital for corporate America, because I just don't believe that corporate America, I left corporate America because even though they were making a lot of money, they didn't want to pay me a lot of money. So I left. Okay. Production in corporate America does not necessarily mean rising household income, Chuck. Those two things do not correlate. You can see in the stock market that publicly traded companies put huge numbers to the bottom line, but do not necessarily pass that wealth on to their employees. So to me, I'm much more concerned about having consumers be able to invest their money in low risk investments for a higher return than I am having zero interest rates for corporate America. That's where I'm at. Now, I understand why President Trump wants it. We've already talked about it 2 or 3 times in the last couple of minutes, that he wants low interest to service that ridiculous debt. But it's not the interest rates that's the problem, Chuck. It's the debt, as you're pointing out.
That's what I'm pointing out, yeah. Yeah, so...
Right, so there you go. So as it goes to CD11, as I was on the phone with Carey Baker a couple of days ago, Carey didn't come up with that concept on his own. Okay, I had to lead him there, right? But, that's what, he did go there, and he recognized that in his own family, Carey Baker has a very conservative family, okay? Carey Baker told us when he was interviewing with the Republican Assembly that he does not invest in the stock market personally. What does that mean? Okay, Carey Baker's wife is a real estate broker. Carey Baker was the property appraiser in Lake County, so they probably invest in real estate. I'm expecting, right? They're probably investing in real estate, right? Yeah, it's manageable. They personally manage it themselves. They're in control of the cash flows. I like real estate for that reason. But so Carey Baker told us when he interviewed with the Republican Assembly that he will not trade stocks when he goes to Washington, D.C., because he doesn't trade stocks now. Now, that could change, when you start seeing these huge returns on invested capital because he has insider trading ability. That might change, but I'm not putting words in his mouth. I'm just acknowledging that people, when their circumstances change, their behavior sometimes changes. But he did say that he would not be trading stocks when he goes to Washington, D.C., because he doesn't trade stocks now. Okay?
So one of the things that coming up in just a couple of weeks is the filing deadline for the quarterly financial disclosures. We know that Joe Strada bought $5 million into this thing all by himself, by his own money. Where do you think the Carey Bakers and the Tim Wilkinses are in regard to finances? Do they really have the money that they would need to go against Strada's $5 million?
If postcards and mailboxes determines the outcome of the election, then Joe Strada will win the election. Okay, because Baker didn't tell me how much money he raised or didn't raise, and neither did Tim Wilkins tell us how much money he raised or didn't raise. But so bottom line is, I think that Carey for sure has raised a reasonable amount of money, but I don't believe he's raised enough money to get him across the finish line unless his political history and his just pure name recognition that he had before he ever came into the race, if that's enough to get him across the finish line, then Carey could very well win the election. But money, Strada has obviously an extreme advantage financially. And if advertising is going to win the election, then Joe Strada will probably win the election, Chuck.
Yeah. Name recognition obviously is a big deal, and I think we would agree that Carey Baker kind of wins out on name recognition in this community.
That's true until Joe Strada drops 15 postcards in your mailbox and hits your social media accounts and starts pounding your phone with text messages. His name recognition will skyrocket. That's what money is all about, Chuck. Money is about purchasing name recognition. That's what it is. That's why, again, just like in any advertising program with any business, right? They put mail into your mailbox over and over and over again, not just to deliver a particular message to you, because some people read the mail and some don't, but just to drive name recognition. So
right.
That's the benefit of money. Money, the purpose of money is to create branding and name recognition on behalf
right.
of the advertiser, who in this particular case is a political candidate, Chuck.
Right. Kind of in sales, it's the law of 7 touches. You got to get your name in front of people 7 times before they begin to realize, I remember that guy. 7 mailers.
And if you can achieve those 7 touches in different platforms, that's a plus too.
Obviously, right. If you're
right, because people say this guy's.
The same
this
people
guy
are
is
seeing
touching
you.
my life in different components of my life.
Right.
I'm seeing it in my mailbox. I'm seeing it on my social media. He's sending me text messages. I saw him at the VFW. I saw him at the Republican Assembly meeting or the Republican Liberty Caucus meeting. He showed up, and we saw signs as we were driving down the road, et cetera. So that's why when people see your name repeatedly in different aspects of their life, that actually brings a little bond to that person as well, even if you don't know the person personally, Chuck.
Right. So I guess we kind of threw a very, very brief description of each of the 3 main candidates, and what we've suggested is that Carey Baker is a career politician. Joe Strada is an inexperienced newcomer, and Tim Wilkins seems to be a polished media professional. Is there anything more that you think we should talk about regarding who these people are?
Well, it's interesting because Carey Baker called me on the phone, and I was really surprised that he called me, to be honest with you. So as you and I discussed off camera, I was probably just on his fundraising list. And, I obviously was present when he interviewed with the Republican Assembly. So his first question out of the box is, how come, what did I do wrong to not win the Republican Assembly's endorsement? So this goes to Carey thought when he walked in the door that because of his conservative values that align with the Republican Assembly's values, he fully expected to get that endorsement. So he asked me, he said, why didn't I get the endorsement? And I told Carey, I said, Carey, they never considered you. Before you even walked in the door, they had already agreed that they weren't going to support you. And why is that? And it's because your resume indicates that you're a career politician, and you can't run away from that. So that was a big deal. So that's what led me. When you come up with an elevator pitch, a two or three word definition or of a candidate, the only thing that can possibly come to your mind with Carey Baker is career politician. You could say conservative career politician, but the fact of the matter is, Chuck, as we said when we were talking to Tim Wilkins, we only see the tip of the iceberg, and the rest of the iceberg is underwater, and you don't see it. So while I fully trust Carey Baker from I'd say, from a ideological standpoint, I do not trust Carey Baker from a political standpoint. And the reason is because I've got 15, 16 years of experience with Carey Baker. And Carey Baker is a defender of the old guard. And you can look at all of his advertising. I saw a post on Facebook today about Carey Baker talking about, his grandfather 5 generations back, was a judge in Massachusetts, and he was on the committee that determined whether or not Massachusetts was going to go along with the signing of the Constitution, right? So that just goes to the idea that Carey Baker sees himself as an extension of the founding fathers, and everybody should just, basically get on board because of his multi-generational understanding of the founding of the country, which I do appreciate that. But he still kind of lives in that bubble where he believes that he should be able to choose who the elected officials are. So I challenged Carey Baker on that point when we were on the call, because again, Dennis Baxley, the senator from here who served 22 years in the Florida legislature, believes the same thing, that that the insiders should be able to choose who succeeds them. And they're just really out of touch with the grassroots. And I told Carey Baker on the phone, I said, as these counties grow in population, the new people who are moving here don't know that your grandfather 5 generations back was an influencer over the signing of the Constitution, and they're not overly concerned about that. Carey Baker says that even though he doesn't live in the district, because his wife went to Leesburg High School, which is in the district, that means that him living in Eustis is close enough to the district that we should all consider him as as part of the district, even though he doesn't physically live in the district, right? Joe Strada kind of made the same connection. He said, I don't live in the district, but I do business in the district. Therefore, I should be considered a resident of the district because I have a business there and I employ several hundred employees there. And then, of course, Tim Wilkins makes the argument that he's the only candidate of the 3 who actually lives in the district. But the fact of the matter is that from the legal standpoint, the candidate does not have to live in the district. The candidate has to live in the state, but not in the district. So the law doesn't recognize residency in the district as a requirement. But it is also true that these candidates just don't really understand, or, they don't connect with the voter who wants their representative to live in the district. Although voters repeatedly in this district, CD11, have voted for candidates who don't live in the district. So, for example, Tim Sullivan served on the Board of County Commissioners in this district for 8 years, never lived in the district, never intended to live in the district. Voters knew it, voted for him anyway. Anthony Sabatini doesn't live in the district, in his District 1, right? Anthony Sabatini lives in Howey in the Hills. I understand he's building a house in Groveland, which I think at some point he'll live in District 1. But right now he doesn't, right? And a lot of people are unhappy about that. But voters, when it comes down to it, push comes to shove, they vote for the candidate they want to vote for, regardless of the candidate's residency in the district, Chuck.
So in our final minutes, Mike, why don't you give us your assessment of what really is going to happen here? I mean, are you basically saying, I think you said it, maybe this is your final, that Strada is going to buy his way into this race with multiple postcards in mailboxes, or do you think that Carey Baker, with his name recognition, is going to make something happen? Or what about Tim Wilkins and his ground game? Give us your prediction.
I think the race is between Carey Baker and Joe Strada. And again, I think that while I would love to believe that most voters are going to look at Carey Baker's conservative ideology, which is consistent with theirs for the most part, people who are going to be voting in the Republican primary on August the 18th, I think align with Carey Baker's values. But the truth is that Joe Strada's values are not much different, really. The difference is that Joe Strada really just doesn't have the political experience to reconcile his values with the values of voters. So if I want to talk about, Carey Baker's probability of winning, that is going to be where Carey comes from. That's going to be a strength, that people do understand that Carey Baker is a true conservative. On the other hand, they also know that he's a career politician and that he's willing to leverage his political dominance in ways that the voter doesn't really want. So that's where Carey Baker is. Joe Strada, I think the good news for Joe Strada is that I think people, if they get to know him at all, they will say, this guy's a decent guy who did in fact build and scale, keyword, a reasonably sized mechanical company, air conditioning, electric plumbing. And they're going to see him as a nice guy who happens to have the money to invest in his race. And he will create the name recognition through various different marketing techniques, including direct mail, which is expensive, but he will do it. And so I think the race is pretty much between Carey Baker and Joe Strada. I hate that. I like Tim Wilkins, but I don't believe the grassroots has ever demonstrated that they are influential enough over the outcome of elections to win an election based on grassroots activists' support, Chuck.
Well, thank you, Mike Levine. And thank you all for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook and X at RestoreOurRep76. Check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic -ROAR. Please like and share the program. And remember, if you are unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump. And God bless America.